No let up in in Ukraine's biggest protests since the Orange Revolution of 2004. Earlier in the day, the government surviving a vote of no confidence after the prime minister apologized for a police crackdown on protests, while demonstrators again this Tuesday evening massing outside parliament, protesting the ex-Soviet state's last-minute pullout of a deal to closen ties with the EU. Last week, it seemed like Vladimir Putin had the last laugh, using a mix of carrot and stick to get his Russian-speaking counterpart Viktor Yanukovich to drop that deal with Brussels. Putin, who on Monday rewarded Armenia for siding with Moscow with slashed rates on natural gas. But he seems edgy on this topic, denouncing rallies in Kiev and elsewhere as, quote, pogroms intended to destabilize Ukraine for electoral reasons. So where does it all leave Yanukovych, who before jetting off to China to raise more cash, warned that, quote, a bad peace is better than the best of wars? We'll ponder his future, as well as the future of a nation of 46 million, where we'll see that the fault lines have shifted considerably in the past decade. Today in the France 24 debate, is it another Orange Revolution in the making? And with us to talk about it from Brussels, Iryna SKLIAR of the European Center for a Modern Ukraine. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Here in the studio, she's an activist with the FEMEN movement, SHEVCHENKO. Thank you for being with us. He teaches at the French Political Science Institute Sciences Po. Thorniké GORDADZE is the former Georgian Minister for European Integration. And let's welcome as well reporter Julian NUNDY, who studied in Ukraine and has gone back ever since. Yes. Thank you for being with us. The France 24 debate, where you've been weighing in on the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, where our hashtag is F24debate. First, though, let's go to Kiev and in a moment and join, we're going to go in a moment to join France 24's Gulliver CRAGG. We're a little technical issue there. We're hoping to go to him, but we will in a second. Let's begin then with you, Iryna SKLIAR. This vote of no confidence, it was expected to pass. After all, Yanukovych has strong support in parliament. Is this going to, you think, soothe tensions?
Well, we still have to see whether it's going to smooth the tensions. Definitely, the positive thing about this lack of no confidence vote, the government can work and work, as we remember, now we are getting closer to the end of the year. So basically, Ukraine needs to enter new year with a new budget. We have to continue consultations, negotiations, both with the European Union and with Russia Federation for obvious reasons. So for these reasons, it's better to have the government than not to have it. So at least this stability will not harm Ukraine, I think.
Wait a minute, negotiations with both the EU and the Russians. We thought it was, a lot of viewers may think it was game over last week when the government in Kiev pulled out of that deal that was supposed to have been signed at that EU summit.
Well, I would disagree with you, actually, because if you read correctly the statements of the government of the president, the association agreement was not put off. It was put on hold. The pause was made. And the reason for that, as the government explains, is to either negotiate better conditions or to, in some way, to find a solution to economical situation, economical implications that the agreement will have. Some of that economical implications are, of course, due to Russian pressure. So we cannot ignore the fact, and whether we like it or not, we have to find a solution. So recent statement from the government, Prime Minister Azarov told just before I get to your studio that there will be a delegation coming, going to Moscow tomorrow and also to Brussels. So a way out has to be found.
All right,
yeah.
I was going to say, let's pick up on that point, because I think it's important, a bit of news you just gave us, that there's still these delegations going both to Brussels and to Moscow. Before we go to the rest of the panel, let's go to Kiev and join France 24's Gulliver CRAGG, who's been following this story ever since that November 21st about face. Now, Gulliver, the vote of no confidence, has it in any way reduced the numbers out there in the square where you are?
I can't hear your question, I'm afraid. I can tell you about what happened in Parliament today when the motion of no confidence was rejected, and Mykola Azarov, when he made that apology for the violence, well, I don't think very many people could even hear it because he was being booed the whole time and being told to speak Ukrainian. The opposition members of Parliament had not called the Prime Minister into Parliament in order to hear what he had to say. I don't think they're interested in what he has to say at this stage. They come here, they made him come into Parliament in order for him to hear what they had to say. And immediately after the rejection of the no confidence votes, they were back down on Independence Square talking to the crowds. And this afternoon, I would say the crowds were definitely bigger than they were at the same time yesterday afternoon. And the opposition leaders were saying we have to carry on with this protest and we have to direct our demands directly to the president now. Saying, though, that the crowds are bigger today than they were yesterday, there's not a million people down here behind me. There's, several, probably tens of thousands we're talking about, but there are lots and lots of Ukrainians who are not coming out to protest, who are still going to work, and who are either indifferent or against this whole movement. It's quite important to underline that, though. My hunch is that it is growing.
Your hunch is that it's growing. Determined protesters. They seem to be sending out, though, different messages. Before we go back to Gulliver, let's take a listen to what some of them have to say.
Young people, as well as their parents, are occupying the streets because with this government anything can happen. We don't trust them.
At least in Europe, your politicians aren't criminals like here.
Corruption is everywhere, yeah. And cynicism, we really want to see through.
About 10 years ago, we had Orange Revolution, and it was about the same man it is today.
Gulliver, as we heard from those protesters, that last woman, she's got it in for Yanukovych. Some there, though, have a different message. They're saying throw all the bums out, basically. Gulliver, who are the protesters out there? Who are these people?
Well, the slogans that we're hearing have moved from being slogans of Ukraine is Europe to being very frequently slogans down with the gang or out with the crooks. When they're talking about the gang, they're talking about Viktor Yanukovych's very close family and associates. I think they're the people that Ukrainians are most angry with because they're people that they've seen as using Ukraine as a tool for self-enrichment while the economy stagnates or gets worse. So Ukrainians are very angry with that close inner circle of Viktor Yanukovych. I think in particular, other slogans that we hear or chants are the chant to glory to Ukraine, and then the riposte to that which comes from the crowd is to the hero's glory. Now that was always considered a sort of nationalist refrain in Ukraine that was much more commonly heard among supporters of the nationalist Svoboda party and people in the west of the country. It seems to have spread to the whole country and become kind of a more generalized. I think that really this is, again, after the Orange Revolution, a second time around, Ukrainians are really discovering their national identity through this movement. I can't tell you how many times the national anthem is sung here on Independence Square, solemnly, several times a day. Of course, though, as with the time of the Orange Revolution, there is a big division. There are people here from the west, and there are very much fewer people here from the east. And there aren't very many protests going on in the east of Ukraine. Everyone's looking to see whether this movement this time around will spread to the Russian-speaking east. Every time there's a small protest in Donetsk or Kharkiv or Dnipropetrovsk, it makes headlines in the opposition media here in Kiev. But in fact, I spoke to a friend in Donetsk actually just earlier, and he said nothing is happening here at all. People in Donetsk, that's where Viktor Yanukovych is from, in the Russian-speaking east of Ukraine, don't care about this at all. On the other hand, I have been struck by the variety of the people protesting here in Kiev. There's really people from all generations and all social classes, I have the impression.
Gulliver, CRAGG, many thanks for that update from Kiev. From the thick of it there, as we could hear. Iryna, SKLIAR, interesting what Gulliver just said, that effectively it is more people from the West who are protesting, and in the Russian-speaking East, far fewer. You yourself were telling us before the program began that you were born in the Russian-speaking part of the country. Do you sense a change between today and the Orange Revolution of 2004 in that regard?
Well, I think that we all have to recognize this protest not as a protest, but as a revolution. This is what you say clearly. And I don't want anyone to say that this is second Orange Revolution, because this is completely different demonstration, this is completely different revolution. People are coming not for personalities, not for political parties. They are coming for the new Ukrainian dream that was somehow formed right now. And I would not agree with your point saying that those people, they have different commands and different ideas. Because to sign EU agreements is to say no to Yanukovych and to his dictatorship that is just right now coming in its pure form. To sign EU agreements is to say no to Russia and to huge historical influence of Russia towards Ukraine that lasts already for many years.
You call it a dictatorship, but there are elections. There's the next election scheduled in 2015.
What I call dictatorship is that what is going on right now in the street. I call that this is dictatorship that is coming up in its pure form. Never during history of independence of Ukraine, 22nd year already today, we didn't have journalists and protesters who were beaten up, who were bleeding in the square because of their protests. It never happened before. Yes, we were arrested. Yes, we were forced not to occupy our squares, but we never faced violence from police, and we never were bleeding and going to hospitals after our protest. And this never happened before. Right now, we are just copying in its primitive form, we are copying Russian model.
And the Prime Minister's apology?
Well, you know, what else you can expect from the person who is first saying to police to beat people, to make them bleed, and then to see that he's just completely, he cannot stop 500,000 people with policemen who are beating them. What else you expect from him to hear?
Julian Nundy.
It does seem to be that the violence of early Saturday morning, when this protest was broken up, that does seem to be the element that has sparked these huge protests.
300,000 on Sunday.
Yeah, and this is much, much bigger than the Orange Revolution. There were far fewer people out then. It was mainly a Kiev event. This is an event, and a Western Ukrainian event. This is still much the same, but there are people coming from elsewhere. I've spoken to friends in Kiev on the phone who are telling me that one fellow said that the abstentionists are coming out this time. The people the apolitical, the people who normally don't care, are demonstrating this time.
And what do you make of Gulliver Cragg's point that you're hearing the national anthem sung, you're hearing more and more of this nationalist fervor? There is a nationalist party in Ukraine. Is that something that is also different from 2004?
In 2004, there was a lot of singing of the national anthem. What is different is the rise of this Svoboda party, which is a nationalist party which is considered to be of the extreme right, and some people are very worried about it. This is a new element that obviously has to be watched.
Thorniké, GORDADZE?
It's about this issue of national identity and nationalism. One shouldn't forget that Ukrainian national identity has been more blurred in the past. And the fact that today we hear national anthem and slogans about Ukrainian nation as an old nation, as a nation that is European, etc. It doesn't mean that this nationalism is aggressive. It's just assertion or reassertion or reconfirmation of Ukrainian identity. What is national identity? National identity is a daily plebiscite, as one French philosopher said more than a century ago. So we should not be afraid of the word nation in the Ukrainian case. Of course, there's some minority which is more extremist and close to far right, but these people do not represent the majority of those who are present. And all people from different horizons, people from different social classes are here. You cannot make a revolution only with the one pro-Western part of the elite. You have to have everybody united, and this is the case.
We were mentioning earlier how, and Iryna SKLIAR made the point about how another pressing issue now as all these protests are going on, is passing a budget. It's true that cash is also an issue that's coming to a head. Last year, Ukraine issued more than $15 billion in treasury bonds with an interest rate just below 8%. Earlier this Tuesday, political uncertainty scaring investors The rate has climbed above 20%. That's a record. The cost of insuring Ukrainian debt has leapfrogged above that of Cyprus. Only default swaps protecting Argentine and Venezuelan notes are more expensive. And so I ask you this question, Iryna, SKLIAR, we're talking about national identity, we're talking about sovereignty. Effectively, though, Ukraine is in a position right now, it seems, where it has to pick a suitor between either Brussels on the one hand or Moscow on the other.
Well, I think it's a bit simplistic, and then it's not possible in Ukraine case. We cannot ignore neither geography nor political situation. Geographically, we are in between European Union and Russia, but also in terms of identity, we're somewhere in between European Union and Russia. So it's simply something which cannot be ignored. Of course, and that's, I think, what one of the idea the government as the president were trying to convey to EU, that we need somehow to sit in trilateral consultations. Of course, EU does not accept it as a formal dialogue. Of course, it's not acceptable to have any formal trilateral dialogue on official level, but on unofficial level and in any format of consultation, something has to be done if we want to solve the situation. So far, I saw the statements from the European side that some unofficial consultations possible, official or not, but if it doesn't happen, I think what we will see it's this traveling of Ukrainian officials between Russia and between Brussels in order to find a solution, because solution anyhow has to be found.
Thorniké, GORDADZE.
Yes, the cash is a very important issue, but the negotiating or trying to get cash both from Russia or the European Union is clearly not the solution. This solution was already tried for more than 3 years by the President Yanukovych. It didn't work. On one side, you have Russians are proposing some money without almost no conditions about reforms, but about things are about political loyalty, etc. On the other side, the European Union cannot give money, billions of dollars, without having reforms, without having conditions fulfilled in Ukraine about not only economic conditions, but also conditions about human rights, about absence of selective justice. And this is simply not possible. So the fact that Ukrainian government did not make this choice during the years, and now again they are trying to do the same, so continuing to send delegations both in Brussels and
both
Moscow,
East and West.
It's again it's just a continuation of this policy.
And you think for
that,
now
that brought us in this particular situation.
We're going to have to take a quick break. We'll pick up on this point when we get back. This is the France 24 debate.